Welcome to the, oh, I was just told this session is being recorded, by the way, and it will be up on the acids.org website for on-demand viewing at a later time. Welcome to the 2021 Summer Refresher Conference hosted by the San Diego Paralegal Association and Orange County ACIDS. We are excited for you to join us. This is our second session today. Couple housekeeping items. First of all, you guys all are going to be on mute. If you have any questions for our speaker, George, today, please direct them to general questions, and that will be June Hunter. She will take them down, and George will be answering them at the end of the session. I also asked, so we can keep track for CLE, make sure that your name is on there, your first and last name, and not one of your kids' names or one of your dog's names. We have that all the time, so I can keep track for CLE. And thank you again, Sheila, for generously donating the virtual lunch for leaders time frame for our session today. Please go ahead, go do your thing.
Well, I am going to introduce George by telling the story of how we met. I was reading his articles that came in via my email all of the time. And I actually, surprise, had a complaint about, I didn't think the paralegals were getting enough attention. There weren't enough resources for paralegals. And sometimes when I actually write someone and say something like that, not only do I get ignored, if I do get a response, it's something like, well, that is not the aim or goal of our organization. George sent me a very nice email. And the email was, I appreciate your point of view kind of thing. And what ideas do you have? And I'm telling you, that was the start of our relationship. Is that not correct, George?
That is, and I'd like to think that I was well trained in my baby lawyer days to pay close attention to what the paralegals who actually knew what I should be doing had to say to me, because I sure had no clue what I was engaging in when I first got out of law school.
Well, George is going to be talking about a very important subject. And one of the things that I have noticed is that a lot of the recent surveys in the legal community have noted that the role of the paralegal is expanding. Not only is there a need for more paralegals, but the role is expanding. And I know that it's definitely expanding related to technology. So please don't be shy about asking questions at the end about what he's going over. And he is not only a technologist, he is a translator that is able to tell you how it actually gets implemented. It's nice to have an attorney who not only understands what's going on, but it has no problem taking the time to explain the practical aspects. So if we have to have him back again for a virtual lunch, we will. Okay, just so, because I know I always get asked that question. At the end, someone emails me and goes, we're not done and I have more. And so I'm just going to ask in advance. And I know he'll say yes. So yes. I'm going to let him give his credentials, because he needs as much time as possible. This material, I've gone over it, is wonderful. In the material you're going to be receiving today, there will be a wonderful copy of the presentation. And then there's also a booklet that provides you additional information. And I'm going to also follow up later on and go over a few things with one of the virtual lunches. And hopefully we'll figure out when George is coming back. And again, we want everyone to be here next week. It would be great if you guys could attend. Thank you so much. Every week we have virtual lunch at the same time at noon on Fridays. Thanks.
Thanks, Sheila. And if my eyes dart around a bit, it's because I'm looking at 3 screens in order to try to put all of this on. The presentation itself, watching the chat notes, and I've got my own notes to turn to. I got out of law school in 1987. I was a practicing attorney from 1987 till 2003 at 2 different law firms. Early days, it was whatever I was told to work on. Over time, I ended up working more and more on large scale matters, multi-district litigation, fight for the company life. As part of all of that, I got pulled into e-discovery, and by the end of 2003, decided that I was going to give up a partnership at a law firm to focus exclusively on e-discovery instead. Spent 13 years as a consultant in e-discovery, launching EDRM along the way. And most recently, now I have, for 10 and a half months now, been with Reveal, heading up brand awareness and part of the product roadmap team, which takes me to what I want to talk about today, something that I think is brand new to the e-discovery space and should, it's so brand new, it's not even there. We will be demoing this at ILTA for those of you who are there. It's a capability that should greatly improve your ability when you're working on matters and the attorney's ability when they are working on matters to hone in on content that they are trying to locate, pull it together to be able to better tell the story that needs to be told. To get to that point, talking about this capability, high precision classification and high precision classification models, I need to take a few other steps first. And that takes me to the agenda here. What's the problem that we're trying to address with what we're calling high precision classification? And it's really one about how artificial intelligence is used in litigation, which is primarily for predictive coding, TAR, active learning, whatever you want to call it. The essence of how that works, I'll go over. The challenge of how that works is that for active learning, for TAR, all the tools available to us today to work with entire documents. They treat the document itself as the smallest usable unit. But you know, and I know, that it's not the document that counts. It's a piece of information or multiple pieces of information in a document that are what really matter. I think back, there was a set of cases I worked on for 15 years, fight for the company life set of cases. There was a document in there, I forget what the document was, but it was about 200 some pages long. In that entire document, there was one sentence that was exceedingly important. Everything else was a distraction. If you were to take a document like that and try to train any of the predictive coding systems with that document, the system wouldn't have any way to know what in that document you thought was important, what in that document you thought wasn't important. It instead inherently means there's a lot of imprecision. It's looking at that whole document, trying to figure out what matters. You end up wasting a lot of time that could be used in other ways, incurring a lot of expenses, not because you're doing anything wrong, but because of the limitations of the tools available. Stepping back a little bit, artificial intelligence. What is artificial intelligence anyway, and how is it used more broadly? Artificial intelligence, to use one of the many different definitions out there, it's software that is trained to predict events, trained to try to predict activities, trained to move you somewhere. Some real life examples in the medical arena. There are doctors and medical staff who these days use artificial intelligence systems to help them diagnose pediatric diseases of any sorts. They use them as well. Increasing radiologists use artificial intelligence systems to help them locate the nascent forms of cancer. If you look at things like carpooling, artificial intelligence is used to help better line up someone seeking a carpool with the carpools that are available, looking at not only what they've been doing, but trying to predict how they might be behaving in the future, both the riders and the carpool drivers and matching them up more closely. I think we all know that artificial intelligence is used to try to sell us products that either we want or that the people selling the products think we should want. A classic by now example of that is what you see anytime you go to Amazon and start shopping there. And then in the legal system, there are efforts in place and people who are actually using or trying to use artificial intelligence for things such as figuring out how long a jail sentence ought to be. There is dispute and debate about whether that's a prudent use of artificial intelligence, but it's certainly something people are looking at. If we move into the world of e-discovery, there are a number of ways that artificial intelligence is used. Of course, there's predictive coding, which I mentioned. It can be used to analyze data much more broadly. And there are many different ways, all a function of the specific type of data you're trying to analyze. Really, what you're trying to do in many cases is detect patterns of behavior, detect patterns of activity. And it's not just detecting a pattern, it's looking for what's anomalous in that pattern. For example, if you see something that shows that two people are communicating regularly 9 to 5, in a theft of intellectual property case where one of those people allegedly stole the property and sent it on to the other, and then you find something that shows that they are communicating now with different email addresses and at late hours in the night, those are anomalies, deviations that could be potentially important. You can use AI to recognize image content. You can use it to detect sentiment. It's used to process natural language and a lot more. So one of the examples, just so I can give you something more concrete, is the use of AI to recognize image content. There are some systems, Reveals is one of them, but it's not alone, that will allow the AI to evaluate the visual content of documents, tag those documents with labels that are then searchable. And in this example, we've got a photo that shows buildings, a construction cone, some other things you probably can't see very well. The system thinks with a 90% degree of confidence that there is housing in this picture. 90 degree of confidence building, 85 degree of confidence bricks, and so on. There in this one are 7 different image labels. Some of them have as many as 20 and 30 labels. This allows you to search images by the content you're trying to locate instead of having to go through one picture after another. AI is what allows that to happen. There are a couple of different ways we're working with, as a starting point, AI software from AWS, and then we enhance it further to accomplish this. Another example that I mentioned before is the use of AI to detect and to analyze sentiment. So here in this example, the system has looked at our favorite, or what we've come to hate, Enron data, and has tried to find certain patterns. So it can see that here, Jeff Dasovich was sending email to Richard Shapiro with a negative sentiment. So it looks at the content and tries to figure out, is there a positive tone, negative tone, any number of different types of tone, and that's happening late night and weekends as opposed to during the workdays. Does it matter? Maybe, maybe not. It all depends upon what you are working on. But it's the AI that enables that to be accomplished. If you try to use more traditional approaches, looking at one document after another, performing keyword searches, even using TAR, chances of being able to bring this type of information to the surface are pretty close to nil. So these are some of the ways that artificial intelligence is used within e-discovery. Coming back now to active learning, or TAR, or predictive coding, because what I ultimately want to talk about here builds on that. The way that an active learning process typically starts in many of the e-discovery platforms is with some form of classification and the ability to build classification models. Here is, I just grabbed a portion of what you see in the screen with Reveal to show you classification in action. And this is something where someone, when looking at a document, whether it's a reviewer, it's the trial attorney, it's someone in the team of paralegals, it doesn't matter who it is necessarily. Someone looking at the document, because of the way this matter is set up, can choose to say, yes, I think this document is responsive. That's the selection chosen in this example. Or could say, no, I don't think it is responsive. I think it's non-responsive. There are two further options here. Some systems allow for this, others don't. One is to choose neither responsive nor non-responsive, but say this is something where we need to look, someone needs to look at this further. And so it can be teed up for those purposes, or there's a tech issue involved. You can set these tags up however you want, name them whatever you want. There are some indicators here that you can choose to show or not show, depending upon what, if you have admin rights, you think is appropriate for the situation. I've got them shown here. That thumbs up indicator and the thumbs down indicator, those are the two pieces that are the active learning parts. Very much like what you see if you've got an iPhone and you're in the news feed and you like an article in there, it's recognizing that to try to figure out what similar articles to give you. Here, a thumbs up is doing the same thing. It's saying, okay, I like this document. Remember back to the beginning, I'm talking about entire documents. I like this document. Go find more documents like this and feed them back to me. Or I don't like this document. So if you see documents like this, no, that's not what I want to be shown right now. The other indicator that is shown here that you can choose to show or not show, see the number on the upper right hand, 88. The system is saying, from what you've told me so far, and from the analysis the AI, and the computer system have done, I think that the document you have up in front of you has an 88% chance of being responsive. Now, the AI could be wrong. This is just something for you to see. You make your decision. All of this, again, looks at the document and not at some portion of the document. This is the way I think pretty much every predictive coding or TAR system out there operates in essence. Let's look at it a little more closely. So I've grabbed a screen capture. You might not be able to see the details of it, but that's not critical. Again, here, I've got the box that is showing the selections available. And what the system is really looking at is this content here. And let's see if I've highlighted. Yeah, it's this content here, the stuff in the blue box. What you would see if you were looking at an email message. It's looking at the text in there. It's looking at the metadata there potentially, depending upon how the system is set up. And it's looking at all of that text. If the document goes on for 200 and some pages, it's looking at all 200 and some pages. And what it's doing is taking all of that content and your decision, responsive or not responsive, putting those together and trying to figure out from that, are there other documents like this document out there that work? The introduction of this type of capability, which has been around since probably the early 2000s, really was a game changer in the e-discovery space. It took a while to catch on. There are still people who are hesitant about using it. The first judge to be portrayed as having endorsed the use of tar was Andrew Peck when he was a magistrate judge in the Southern District of New York. If you read his decision in that case closely, and if you have a chance to hear what he has said about his decision, he didn't actually endorse the use of tar. He simply told the parties that if they wanted to use it, he wasn't going to get in their way. They could go ahead and use it. Nonetheless, folks grabbed onto that to say, see, a judge says it's okay, now I can do this. Since then, any number of judges have said essentially the same thing that Andy Peck said, which is, if you want to use it, go ahead, if you find it's useful. Now, there are, of course, situations where people want to use it on one side, don't want to use it on the other side. You're familiar with all of that, all the gamesmanship that goes with that. That happens at any number of levels in any number of matters. The point I want to come back to here, though, and where I'm ultimately going, is that the way these models or these systems all work as they evaluate the data is that they look at the entire document. This all takes me to what I want to introduce today, which is high precision classification models. Now, I don't have a lot to show you. We will be demoing the capability at ILTA, but it's not quite ready for me to put up on the screen yet here, but I can show you the essence of how it works. So instead of, think back here, that entire document, instead, you can highlight just a portion of the text that's in that document. In this instance, I've grabbed one line. Attached are the two files providing the weekly monitoring report. It's just arbitrary. I just grabbed that. But the point is that you can grab one piece of text in the document, a word, a sentence, any number of characters, a paragraph, whatever you care about. And then with that, you tell the system, look at that in particular, that highlighted text, and now go out and find other text out there in other documents that is similar to that. So don't grab the entire 200 plus pages, grab this one line. Don't look for the entire 200 plus pages elsewhere. You're not going to find it anyway. Instead, look for things that are similar to that one line. They may not have any of the same words, depending upon how the system works, but they should at least have the same concepts in there. When you do this, the way we're setting this up, you can pick one line in a document and say, go find more like that. But you also can choose multiple lines, and for each line, you can say, I care about it for some other reason. I didn't expand this out. It might be a little harder to see here. Here, I've actually got 6 models, 6 AI models available in this example. The responsiveness one, which I highlighted, but then there are 5 product liability issue models. Is this text about a design defect, failure to warn, manufacturing flaw, fraud, conspiracy, all the types of things I used to deal with when I was working on products cases. If you find one portion of the text that you think is responsive for however you're defining responsiveness, you can start training a model on that, a responsiveness model. If you find another piece of text in there, could be even the same piece of text, an overlapping section of text, a completely different part that relates to your design defect issues, you can tag that and run a second model in there and tell the system, go out and find, on the one hand, more responsive stuff, and on the other hand, separate from that, go out and find more design defect stuff. You can put any number of models in a single matter. You can define the models yourself, build them out yourself, assuming you're given the rights to do that within the system. And so what you have here is a situation where the artificial intelligence is now used to select specific content. What I'd like to be able to do, of course, is show everything in action, but I can't. I can, though, put up a more conceptual illustration of what I mean. So you start out training the model on the left-hand side. You could have, for example, a 9-page long document. And the third page of that document contains 2 lines of text, the ones I've got highlighted in green with the little dots around them here. That's the stuff I care about. You tell the model, go find more like this. That's essentially what all predictive coding systems are. Go find more like this. It goes back, it churns, and it brings back to you a 6-page document. Page 5 of that 6-page document also has 2 lines of text, 2 different lines of text, but very similar in content and conceptually to the 2 lines of text in your 9-page document. So different documents, different pages within the documents, different text within the documents, but similar. And it brings that document back to you, not because it's a 6-page document and you were looking at a 9-page document. It doesn't care about that part. It cares about page 3, document 1, second paragraph, page 5, or document 2, page 5, third paragraph. It's much higher precision. It's much more tightly focused. Now, a couple of other points on that then. The model, as it's doing its prediction, remember that classification score I showed earlier? It can bring back a classification score as well, so that it doesn't just show you, here's a similar segment, but it also can say, well, we think this is 88% similar, or 12% similar. You can take a further step within the platform and say, okay, I understand you found a range of stuff that's similar. For my immediate purposes, I only want to see everything that's 90% similar or better, 90%, 93%. Don't show me the 70% similar stuff. Or you might turn it on its head and say, what I really want to see is only the stuff that's kind of similar. Show me 10% similar or less, because that might be the purpose you're trying to achieve here. How does all of this help? It helps especially with the long document example I'm talking about, where the system can't tell whether it's 9 pages or 99 pages. Traditional approaches to active learning, they don't know if it's paragraph 2, page 5, paragraph 3, page 9. They don't know what it is you care about, so they do their best at guessing. Here, it's much more targeted, so you're much more likely to get back results that are akin to the ones that you're looking for. It also can work well on even medium to short documents. It doesn't require that you be looking only in long documents, because really the platform doesn't care how long the document is. It's focusing on that particular piece of text. I have talked enough, I think, right now, just talking. What I'd like to do is, even though I'm supposed to wait until only we have 10 minutes left, go ahead and ask for questions, comments, feedback, whatever now, and then figure out if we want to, where we want to go from there.
Well, George, I will tell you, I have not seen any questions come in the chat box for you. That means that you are doing stellar at presenting.
Or I've done a really bad job.
People could be in a food coma. I'm just saying, it is the lunch
That's
hour.
true. So never mind the chat box then. Questions, comments, observations, anyone.
It's for your waiter.
Yeah.
George, this is Eric Cook. How are you?
Okay, how are you doing?
Great, thank you. Thank you for taking us along this refresher course. I had a quick question. oh man, I'm drawing a blank now. What have you seen with like, because I don't have any real like significant experience with this type of document review. I've had a little bit, but how is it getting advanced with where the AI and stuff like this can kind of recognize more like if a person was actually doing the reading to find out, oh yeah, that's what we need. That's that like diamond in the rough that we need right there. Is there how is that developing in general?
So are you asking about how well the AI can evaluate the reviewers? Or was
No,
it
I'm asking more how the program itself is getting developed to better identify these things. It seems like it's still got a long way to go.
Yeah, and so one major advance, I think, is with the introduction of just what I was talking about at the end, the high precision classification models that allow you to focus in. I can give a couple of related examples that I think help maybe address the question, not exactly the way it was asked, but let's see if this works. I have used, for 4 years before joining Reveal, I was at a large service provider, BDO. One of the tools we used regularly was BrainSpace. And I was able, using BrainSpace with its CAML capabilities, which are its predictive coding capabilities, and its cluster wheel, which is a way of allowing you to bring concepts to the forefront, find concepts you didn't even necessarily knew you care about, and then find similar materials. Using those two capabilities within BrainSpace, and then to a much lesser degree, capabilities within review tools on several investigations, 3 in particular, 2 DOJ investigations and then a state equivalent investigation. We were able, using those tools, to work through anywhere, I think the smallest case was about 200,000 email messages. The largest matter we were at, last I was working on it, I think we were at around 4 million email messages, and then a roughly equal number of additional files. On that latter one, that was one of the DOJ investigations. When I left, we had probably completed maybe our 11th production of documents to the DOJ. We had scrutinized those materials in many different ways, primarily using those tools. And we had accomplished this with, at any given time, only 2 people from the core investigative team actually working with the documents, so the law firm's core investigative team. And then at any given time, 2, 3, maybe at most 4 people from our side working with the documents. We didn't have any traditional document reviewers. We didn't have a document team. Instead, we used the technology to hone in on the things we were looking for. And in that situation, the DOJ had served a civil investigative demand initially. And as part of that, they had served a set of interrogatories. These are the things we're looking for. We took those interrogatories, broke them down to a certain extent, and then for each of the components of those, went looking for content that matched up with that. We're able to find that content, package it up, send it back to the DOJ. They would then follow up with further questions. We would do further searching. And like I say, at the end, I think we were on about our 11th production to them. I don't know what has happened to that matter since, but at least at that point, we've been working with close to 4 million email messages, and really just 2 people that you could define as document reviewers. And typically it was either, if I think of that team, most of the time it was 1 attorney and 1 paralegal who are going through those documents.
And how long did it take you to get through those approximately?
It varied greatly for any given thing that we were looking for. if we were really effective, it was anywhere from minutes to an hour or two, but it also could equally be much longer than that. And it depended so much on exactly what we were trying to locate, how well defined it was, how well what they asked for matched up with the content that was in the documents they were wanting us to look at. And they wanted us to look primarily at the email messages. So that was our primary focus.
And then also from a basic standpoint, how do you, in general, when you're doing this type of review, how do you keep at it without getting worn down by the process?
That's always a challenge, right? Part of it is, I think the more that the people who are involved in the review have an ability to see the results of the work that they are doing, the more likely it is that they can feel engaged and energized. I think back to the early days of document review platforms, long before we were dealing with content in an electronic that came to us in an electronic form, but rather it was paper that was either photocopied or scanned or whatever. When we first started putting screens instead of pieces of paper in front of reviewers, the very first people doing it set the systems up so that there was an endless stream of documents. The reviewers quickly burned out because they could never see an end in sight. There was always another document. There was never closure of any sort. So folks working on those activities quickly realized the virtue of batching documents from a reviewer morale perspective. That way you could get a batch of documents, whether it was 100 or 50 or 10, whatever it was, and you could work your way through it and finally reach a point where you had accomplished something. You had finished your batch of documents. We always had that really on the paper side because no one was going to plunk a never-ending stream of paper down on your desk. They were going to hand you a stack of paper, however thick it was. At some point, you would get done with that stack of paper, and then you would move on to another one. When we moved over to the screen, we forgot to keep that concept there. Bringing that in by batching documents helped immensely. Now, as we move forward, when we have things like these AI models, you can run a model and then start looking at results. If the system allows, you can look at results as you are using the model. Then it becomes a decision on the part of the people administering the projects as to what they let the folks reviewing content see. Sometimes they just want people who are heads down, eyes down. They don't want those folks thinking about anything beyond this specific objective they need to accomplish. You see that especially in something like a second request.
George, we have another question in the chat box I want to get to really quickly. I know the answer to this, but no one came to hear me. So
okay.
Rob Caruso wants to know, how do these models work with other types of ESI like calendar entries or calendar items? And what about instant message platforms like Teams or Slack? And I always love it when people talk about Slack data, right? And things like that. So what do you think?
So
how does it work?
It is very much a function of the particular platform you use. Some platforms don't handle that at all. No platform has, especially that latter part, Slack and the like, nailed. We and others are working on that. We'll, even with, I think, what we'll have available to show at ILTA, there might be more. There are there are mock-ups, which I can't show you because you're not under a non-disclosure agreement, that show what that might look like as we work forward with it. Right now, dealing with things like Teams and Slack is just a frustrating challenge because you get the stuff basically as blocks of text, and they might get thrown into a spreadsheet, or each block of text might be treated as if it were a single document, where they might get artificially grouped together to make it look like you've got a stream of communications. For the moment, in pretty much every platform out there, it's a frustrating exercise. That is changing. That will change. A year from now, we can have a very different discussion about this, not just with what Reveal has to offer, but I suspect with what all the major e-discovery platforms have to offer. Then when you get into things like calendar entries, there too, it's very much a function of the individual platform you use. If I were to take you to the Reveal platform and take you over to the section where you can see pre-built reusable artificial intelligence models, there is, for example, a model there designed specifically to look for out-of-office messages. I think we're working on a calendar entry model specifically for trying to identify particular things within calendar entries. But there's no one answer for all platforms. You need to take a look at the platform you're using, look at what capabilities have been enabled in that, and then when it doesn't have the capabilities you're looking for, you have a choice. Either you try to figure out how to jerry-rig the platform and make it do what you want to do or close enough, and we've all had to do that through all the years of e-discovery, or you reach a point where you're sufficiently frustrated with that and presumably a number of other things that you say, I got to look to see what else is out there. And then you go looking for other platforms. There's no good, easy answer out there for either of those when you combine it all together, but the industry is moving forward and making advances.
That was the only other question in the chat box.
Anybody else questions? You're a quiet group right now.
Very quiet. I like how you're breaking this down, though. We had a talk internally about how AI is very misunderstood. Just I think across everything, you have those people who believe AI is taking over and we'll no longer need attorneys, and those who believe that AI is the worst thing that ever came on the scene and it's not very effective. And I suspect if we got everybody to the middle of the road, understanding that AI will not take over and it is not the worst thing, it's actually meant to assist, that we would see more, I think, more adoption in the legal community of using that AI to assist you. It's just another tool. It's like when we move from typewriters over to computers, we could process our documents more efficiently and much quicker. And in my opinion, I could be totally wrong here, AI has been designed to do just that, move you from the typewriter over to the computer and make that processing more efficient and much quicker for you, in that more streamlined process. And I'm hoping we reach some level of saturation in the legal industry when it comes to that. So, and I think you're doing a great job at helping us get there.
At Sheila's request, I put together, and I think you either all have or should get, a document that lists, I think it's 14 posts I've done about AI, and then just gives preliminary starting information about each of those with links to the entire post. We wouldn't want to put all of the posts in there way too long. But I've tried to cover a number of things in those posts. One of the ones that I think made it there, but I'm not sure it did, is one of the earlier ones I wrote about for Reveal about artificial intelligence, where I compared it to two things. There's the shop-worn analogy to John Henry and the steam drill. But the other thing I looked at is at the MIT Media Lab, there was, and I think still is, a professor who was a very serious technical rock climber. And if I remember correctly, he had a serious accident which led to the loss of the lower part of both of his legs. He did not, however, want to give up rock climbing. He did not want to give up walking or any of those things. And being the type of person he is, with the expertise and the intellectual capacity that he has, he set about trying to figure out how to solve that problem and developed what he's referred to in broader terms, where he developed 2 new limbs for himself. What he referred to, I think, as a tethered exoskeleton. These not only helped take him back in many ways to where he was, with these, he could not just walk, he could go up and down stairs, he could run. He could also do things rock climbing he never could before because he made these legs literally extensible. He could make them longer as he needed to, so that he could reach out with his foot while rock climbing and reach a hold that was impossible for him to get to before. Last I looked in, he was working on trying to figure out how to add sensation to the artificial limbs, so that when he touched a surface with that artificial foot, he could feel the surface he was touching. The artificial intelligence we're using in eDiscovery, though nowhere advanced in many ways, is what he was doing, and in some ways more advanced, is a similar thing, I think. It's our tethered exoskeleton. It's what extends our capabilities. It's what lets us do the things we otherwise couldn't do. I never could have sat enough people down in front of those 4 million email messages to ever find the content we were looking for one of those interrogatories for the DOJ, to say nothing of the full set, and then their regularly changing requests. I could have gotten closer with a non-AI driven eDiscovery platform, but rolling in the AI capabilities, the unsupervised learning capabilities, which looks for concepts, clusters them together, and displays that up without asking me what I'm looking for. And then the supervised learning capabilities, the CAML, TAR, predictive coding, whatever you want to call it, capabilities that let me say, I like this now, give me more like that. They let me extend our team out in ways that simply wasn't otherwise going to be possible. What I'm talking about here then, I mean, the focus of this discussion, at least the nominal focus, the high precision classification capabilities, is yet a further extension, I hope.
But you just described the perfect paralegal working for her boss.
Well,
or
there
his
is that
boss,
too. Yeah.
right? Like knowing what you needed before you asked for it and finding that. You just described literally the perfect paralegal. I'm excited to have you on today.
There you go. I don't know if you want to think of yourselves all as tethered exoskeletons, but
Well, that's not far from the truth in many of our supporting roles. So for all of us that are legal professionals supporting great attorneys, I think we're tethered exoskeletons in certain ways. But I think this is phenomenal, and lots of comments about everyone's really enjoying your presentation.
we've got, on my clock, 12 minutes left.
We do. I haven't seen any other questions, so.
And Eric, you're right. That's Hugh. You sent me a direct message. That is Hugh Herr at MIT. HERR. There are some there were, and I believe still are, incredible videos out there showing some of the things he's done and some of the things that he and his teams have built. It's really, I think, quite inspirational.
Hey, George, it's Eric once again. Segueing off of that, sensational things that Her's done and continues to do. Can you tell us about your sensational things that you've done to deal with all of this that you use on a daily basis that might help some of us to kind of get into the field, and maybe for those that have been in it to get better?
Well, one, going back to Sheila's point at the beginning, I'd be nowhere and I'd be nothing without the regular support, help, and guidance of paralegals from the first day I got started practicing law on. When I, at the first law firm I was at, reached the point where it was time to start building out a litigation support team, there weren't, and at that day, really litigation support personnel as such. That was back in, 1989 or something like that. And I recruited heavily from our paralegal ranks for folks to help with that. And then when I started building out an e-discovery team, and that would have been in the early 1990s, it was the same. I drew heavily from those ranks as well. I knew people who tried to draw heavily from the IT side, and there is merit to that. But I found that at least with the people I was working with, it was a lot easier to bring paralegals up to speed on the IT side than it was to bring ITs up to speed on the paralegal side. And with most of the attorneys I was working with, they were the hardest to bring up to speed on either side. So relying on that support has been critically important for me. So that's one thing. Another thing completely different from that, you can't see the setup I have here, but if I were to somehow turn everything around and let you see it, you would see an arc of 6 computer monitors, and then an iPad and an iPhone as well. Because at least for me, that's 2 computers, each computer with 2 external monitors. That's my real workspace. That's where I can get stuff done. My desk, that's just a place to collect clutter and hold up the monitors. It doesn't serve me any good purpose other than that. Oh, and I can put the microphone on there as well. Having that large number of monitors means that I can bring up Excel here and Excel there and the reveal platform there and keep my email up visible in front of me. And then on another screen, do 3 or 4 or 5 or how many web searches that I need to do and see all of those. For me, with my ADHD challenges, it helps. I need to be able to see that. Some people can stack things one on top of the other. One monitor works for them and they just change out screens to see what they need to. I can't function that way very well. I feel when I have to go on the road and I only have my laptop screen, I feel like someone lopped my hands off because I feel that much less productive. So at least for me, another thing over the years that really has been helpful is to have that large screen space to work on. Another useful step all the way along has been to remember that help can come from many different directions. Back in, this was probably in maybe 98 or so, I was working on a matter where we got produced to us a whole bevy of spreadsheets with something in them that I had never seen before. There's these pivot tables. I had no clue what a pivot table was. Like, what is this thing? It looks like it might be useful. I don't know. I was also, I had overall responsibility for all IT functions in the law firm. And I was chatting with the office of the firm administrator, who at the time was taking a course in Excel. And I just happened to mention in passing that I had run across this weird thing in Excel. And he said, oh, you know what? We covered that last night in my class. Let me tell you what that is. So the importance of turning everywhere you can think of for guidance and being open to that help, I think is really significant. It is useful, I think, to get certifications. I don't think so much so you can say, I have a certification. I think rather it's useful to get certifications because of the education that comes along with getting that certification. So whether it is the SED certification from ACEDS, I finally worked up my courage sometime in the last year to take that test. I was deathly afraid that I would take the test and fail. And then what would I ever be able to say to myself, and how could I ever let anybody else know that it happened? But I took it, I passed. It was a relief. The work involved in being ready to take that test can help greatly expand one's horizons and help fill in the gaps that all of us, because we're essentially all autodidacts in this industry. We've learned on our own, fill in the gaps we didn't even know we had. If there's a particular platform you use and there's training and certification for that platform, by all means pursue that as well. Whether it's relativity, I assume Disco's got training and certifications. We've got
We do.
6. Yeah, I thought so. We've got 6 certifications and an AI certification coming out as well. There are any number of those materials. It's for the educational part alone, it's worth going after that. So I think those are some off-the-cuff thoughts, Eric, to your question. And Sheila, we're down to what, 3 minutes, 2 minutes?
We have 4 minutes. And George, I also want to say, don't you think networking plays a big part? Like, I know you
Enormous.
through networking on LinkedIn, and I tell people, what, you don't have a LinkedIn account? If you don't buy into social media, great. LinkedIn, I don't consider social media at this point. It's a very beneficial tool for educating yourself. So let's say you don't have time or money to get a certification. There's a lot of material provided by individuals like you on LinkedIn. And I believe, like, I got my job that I currently hold through networking on LinkedIn. Literally, I would have never known, never applied for it. And the education that is on LinkedIn, again, posted by individuals like you, is phenomenal. So don't you think that's also a big help in, if you want to, further your walk in legal technology, going that route as well?
Absolutely. I mean, I am not, social media is not my thing. I have a Facebook account. I don't remember the last time I actually did anything with it, and I have no intention of doing anything with it. But LinkedIn is a critically important tool for me to connect with and stay connected with people, especially right now. But even when we could travel, and as we're able to travel again, it still will be a very important thing. So there's the virtual networking through LinkedIn. There's the in-person networking through conferences, whether it's ILTA, if ACEDS puts on another conference there, the Masters Conference later this year, Legal Tech, anything that you can get to. I find I get the most value out of those conferences, not from the educational sessions, not from what I see in the exhibit hall, but from the time I'm able to spend talking with people, either time that's been scheduled ahead of time or the serendipitous things, the meetings in the hallways. But the linking, the networking, I think, is critically important.
I am not seeing any other questions. You did a great job. Like, it is always amazing spending a few, minutes. And when I say few, I mean a full hour. But it's always great because, I really try to catch your Friday interviews. I find them super helpful. And you always have a way of breaking things down in a way that all of us who don't speak the same language you speak completely understand. And I would encourage everyone who has not connected with George on LinkedIn, get yourself a LinkedIn account if you don't have one. Make sure George is on your frequently followed list.
In case you missed what Jen was talking about, every Friday it's half an hour, right? Half an hour conversation with an illuminary or someone who has an extremely deep perspective on things that we deal with all the time. And it is always enlightening because there's at least one or two things that are said that make you think about things that you didn't realize were actually needed to be thought about. And, broadening your horizons by listening to other people who have real important jobs or who write very well is great for not only your confidence, but also for your choosing where you want to go next. And I've found a lot of resources just by listening to people that George has interviewed. And with that, I'm going to let George say goodbye, and we'll see everyone tomorrow.
Well, thank you very much for the opportunity to join you for this past hour, and have a good weekend.
Thank you again, George. You guys have a great weekend.
Thanks,
Marla,
George.
thank you for putting this together. June, thank you for putting this together. I I'm so impressed. That's all I can say. I'm just very impressed.
Don't forget, tomorrow morning, starting at 9 a.m. Pacific time, grab your favorite morning beverage, be it coffee, mimosas, Bloody Marys, etc. And then we continue on at 10:30 tomorrow morning. So we hope to see you then.
Bye, everybody.
Thanks.
Have a good night.